Welcome to the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers Spotlight on the Issues webinar series. I'm your host, Jason Modglin, the president of the Alliance. It is my honor to be with you today. The Texas Alliance of Energy Producers represents over 2,600 individuals and member companies that are focused on advancing independent operators and the standards of the Texas oil and gas industry through advocacy for smart energy and environmental policy, effective communications, and cost-saving insurance programs the Alliance delivers for our members. This year, the Alliance is celebrating our 90th anniversary. Founded in 1930 in Wichita Falls as the North Texas Oil and Gas Association, we merged with the West Central Texas Oil and Gas Association from Abilene in 2000 and expanded our focus statewide, adding members from across the state. While we celebrate our past, we are firmly focused on the future, delivering solutions for Texas independent operators. I would now like to call on our board chairman, Cy Wagner, to get us started. She is a dynamic leader, a second-generation oil producer, an Aggie petroleum engineer who is at the helm of her family's 40-year oil and gas business in Fort Worth. Cy, would you like to make a few remarks?
I would. Thank you, Jason. On behalf of the board and the membership of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, I'd like to welcome Jason Isaac, as well as all of our viewers. Jason, thank you for your time and insight today. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jason and his wife, Carrie, for a couple of years now, and even the greater honor of working the halls and walking them in Austin and DC, and even the White House last year. I look forward to our members getting to hear Jason speak and experience what all he has to offer today. The Alliance is proud to support Raising America's Energy IQ, which he will elaborate on today, and many other education initiatives. Education of our public, our legislators, and our regulators is one of the core tenets of focus I have for my tenure as chairman. All of our membership, from the small mom and pop operators, the service companies, and the large publicly traded entities, thank you, Jason, for your efforts on our behalf. Thank you to our board and members for joining in, and we look forward to seeing you again soon in our next spotlight. We're going to continue to bring you great events like this and keep you updated on the issues that are facing each of us and our businesses. Please stay tuned to your Alliance email updates and be sure to register for our next event. Thank you, Jason and staff, for your work in bringing this to our members.
Thank you, Cy, for your leadership, and thanks to our board members as well for joining us today. I saw Charlotte McBride, Greg McCain, and Mark Metzler, to name a few, and I see some more coming in as we speak. Our guest today is Jason Isaac. He is the director of Life Powered, a project of the Texas Public Policy Foundation to raise America's energy IQ. Prior to joining Life Powered, Jason, a fourth-generation native Texan, was elected 4 times as a state representative for Hays and Blanco counties in the Texas Hill Country. He served on the Energy Resources and Environmental Regulation Committees, among others. During his 8 years of service, he successfully passed legislation to reduce taxes, strengthen election integrity, improve public education, preserve Second Amendment rights, protect local groundwater, and protect private property rights. He was repeatedly honored for his commitment to limited government and proved to be an effective leader, excelling at both advocating for conservative principles and working across the aisle to find responsible solutions for the future of the Lone Star State. Jason has appeared on national news shows, and his commentaries have been published in The Hill, The Washington Examiner, The Daily Caller, and other publications. He's a graduate of Stephen F. Austin State University and serves as a high school lacrosse coach. He lives in Hays County with his wife, Carrie, and 2 sons. Carrie's in a very close election battle here in Central Texas for state representative. If you would like to submit a question to Jason, please utilize the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We will also run 3 audience questions during our chat, so look for those to pop up on your screen during our talk. We'll go till about 2:45 and wrap up with a few audience questions. Jason, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thanks so much. Happy anniversary to the Alliance. Thank you, Cy, for the introduction, and Jason for the introduction. Appreciate it. It's great to be with the Alliance. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Tell us about Life Powered Project and your work to inform and educate the public about energy, the benefits we take for granted on a daily basis in this country, and then how bad policy can really undermine proponents' stated intentions.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, our short mission statement is to raise America's energy IQ. Our longer mission statement is to really make the connection between human flourishing and our access to energy and the energy that we produce here, not only in Texas, but in the United States, and the products that we get from it and how that's leading to improving our livelihoods. Things like, the cell phones that we would be without if it weren't for fossil fuels and the production of oil and gas. And so we're just trying to raise America's energy IQ to defeat some bad policies that are getting promoted, not only in this state, but around the country and really around the world. You look at what's going on in Europe, and I think Boris came out today and said the UK is going to be 100% wind by 2030. That's going to be awful. It's like, where are they going to resettle now? A few hundred years ago, they left for greener pastures and what's now known as the United States. Where are they going to go next? Because they're not going to be able to afford to get anywhere. It's just awful decisions that they're making. And I'm sure we'll chime in on that policy as well. We focus on America, but every now and then we get called in to do interviews in Germany and the UK. And so it's kind of exciting. But let me, if I could, I'll jump into a presentation here and kind of go through some messaging points that I think will help the Alliance and your members really communicate effectively to people that may love the oil and gas industry, that may be indifferent about the oil and gas industry, or may hate the oil and gas industry. Because I think that we need to take, that our environmental policy should serve mankind and not the other way around. So I'll just jump into this and kind of go through a few slides here and just talk about environmental leadership that we have here in the United States. Again, that middle bullet point there, we think environmental policy should serve humanity or mankind and not the other way around. We think that reliable energy is central to our daily life, and try living without it for even a couple of hours. Of those experienced in California this month, last month, the month before, you've had almost 500,000 people in California that have selectively been turned off, if you will, left in the dark for a couple of hours because that state can't meet their energy needs. And really, energy does power life. Imagine, I know my father who's at home with a breathing machine. I don't know if he could survive 2 hours without having access to electricity. So those are just some of the points that we like to make. And that the first one here, and some of your members may have seen this from me in the past, this is still the #1 messaging points when you want to move people that are kind of indifferent or anti-oil and gas. Talk about how expensive energy hurts the poor. And this point here, again, is our largest mover. And you look at what's happening in California, there's a group called the 200. This is over 200 civil rights organizations that typically wouldn't align with positions from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, where our project is head. But in this particular case, they're suing the California Air Resources Board, the state of California, for violating the Civil Rights Act. And they're saying that their policies that they have been pushing have targeted and affected the colors of community more than anyone else. And this is just a couple of bullet points from their 80-page lawsuit that is now moving forward in the state of California. And you look at who's been impacted by their policies, and it does disproportionately impact those communities of color. So it'll be interesting to see this play out. This is a video when I do presentations, when I used to do presentations in person, which I can't wait to get back to that point in time when I can do in-person presentations again. But right. I show this video of this girl, her name's Aisha, Aysha, and you can go on YouTube and search for this 2 to 3 minute video. And it was produced by UNICEF. And I'm sure UNICEF would never intended that or thought that someone that supports hydrocarbons would be using one of their videos to promote energy. But this is a 13-year-old girl who walks over 8 hours a day to collect water every single day. You see the camel there in the background. It's got some plastic bottles on its back. That's how Aisha transport water for her family. She was 13 at the time this video is made, is 2 years old, assuming she's now 15. But she's the one that's responsible for collecting water for her family. And then she's got to collect wood, dung, and other forms of biomass that they can use to then cook with. 3.8 million people die every year from lung illness associated with indoor air pollution. There are people in other parts of the world that will take animal waste and mix it into a concrete container with water and create biomass so that they can then cook with the gas or create biogas so that they can then cook with that cleaner gas rather than using dung or wood over an open fire in their homes. And there are policies out there that really promote this. There are groups like the United Nations that are not trying to eliminate poverty. They're trying to make poverty sustainable and livable, if you will. It's really tough to live in poverty. They live 20 years, fewer years than we do here in the United States. They're in unsafe situations. But if you get rid of those policies, like we've done in the last couple of years with the Agency for International Development, we can now loan loan money to countries like Ethiopia that want to invest in energy production that's based on fossil fuels, something that had been against their policies up until a few years ago. It's still against the policies of groups like the World Bank and the United Nations. No economic development unless it's 100% renewable, and that's unreliable, as California has been finding out over the last couple of months. So it's just heartbreaking. Women around the world spend over 200 million hours a day, like Aisha, walking to collect water. Katie, our communications manager, wrote a great piece that talks about if you really want to empower women around the world, get them access to reliable electricity. That's 200 million hours a day that could be used in starting businesses, getting involved in civic engagement, furthering education, or getting an education at all. So it's just appalling that there are some policies that really punish people around the world, and that Texas is sitting on the key to ending that poverty, which is fantastic. It's something that we need to do. During the last 4 years, there's been about 14 LNG export terminals that have been approved in the United States. So we've got a really opportunity to completely wipe out poverty in the next decade. That's the messaging point number one. The second one is really the U.S. is a world leader in clean air. And people don't know this. I had a senior staffer for a U.S. senator kind of laugh in my face when I said, I'd love to talk to you about how we're a world leader in clean air and how we've reduced harmful pollution. When I had this conversation over 2 years ago, it was 73%. It's now down 77% of harmful pollution. And this staffer literally laughed in my face and said, where are you getting your numbers from? And he was surprised when I said the World Health Organization and the Environmental Protection Agency. Again, we've continued to see reductions in harmful pollutants since 1970. One of the things this is a recent quote just from last week that I know there's some of us here in Austin who may know a particular environmental lobbyist was presenting to a group at the University of Texas and said, a 50% reduction in vehicle miles traveled in the first several weeks of the pandemic in April, by comparison to the emissions in February, it made a huge difference in air pollution, which is interesting because we actually published research after the first couple of months of the pandemic, because we kept seeing these claims around the world and magazines and New York Times leading headlines saying, the pandemic shows we've got to go with everyone with electric vehicles because of the massive reduction in air pollution. Well, we did the research and found that in cities like Los Angeles and New York, when you see a 10% reduction in harmful pollution, it's practically negligible because their air quality is so clean. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of a percent reduction compared to places like New Delhi or Mumbai, where if you do a 10% reduction in those cities, it is significant. And they did see some significant reductions because they don't utilize the pollution control technology that we do here in the United States. But this 50% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, that got me questioning this particular comment about making a huge difference in air pollution in Austin. And that's what this person was saying, was that we made a huge improvement in air quality in Austin because 50% of the vehicles were off the road. So we went and looked at the air quality monitors from the EPA and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. There are 3 that are here in the Austin area. Air quality in April actually got worse than it did in February. Those are the facts. Those are the science. Our air quality is so near a natural state in this country that taking 50% of the vehicles off the road and it doesn't improve. In some cities like Austin, it actually got worse. And there are other cities around the United States. And it's just showing that weather is having a greater impact on air quality than man has, because our air quality is so clean right now. So if this was PolitiFact, it would get a pants on fire because there was no improvement in air quality in Austin during the pandemic. It actually got worse. So look at economic freedom and how that leads to cleaner air. This is a Fraser's Economic Freedom Index. It has not changed much in the last few years. Neither has the outdoor fine particulate pollution. That's harmful pollution. Hasn't changed much in the last few years. It's only gotten better in the United States. But this shows you that if you really want clean air, get these countries economic freedom, get them prosperity, that economic prosperity and environmental leadership go hand in hand. And these maps just really show that. I think this is just a great comparison. Oh, you want clean air? Get them freedom. Let's export our freedom around the world in the form of, our exported energy products. And then we'll wind up exporting clean air around the world at the same time. And here's kind of a comparison of where we stack up against some of our trading partners. When the president was elected, he said, "I represent the people of Pittsburgh, not the people of Paris," when he was making his argument for withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. Well, we have advocated at the White House and members of Congress that we don't necessarily need a Paris Climate Accord. We need maybe a Pittsburgh Accord that calls for our trading partners to meet our air quality standards. We have the strictest standards. We're the highest of large economies, most in high population countries. We have the cleanest air in the world. Now, there are some smaller island countries that don't have any economy or don't have many people that may have cleaner air. But from a developed economy with a high population, we're world leaders. And that's something that we should be proud of. We shouldn't be punishing the United States. We should be calling on our trading partners to meet our air quality standards to improve the economy and the environment globally. And I think that's a laudable goal that people need to hear about. This is a chart I've come across recently, just looking at the amount of demand for oil and how it leads to really living longer, but fewer air pollution mortality. And look at the countries that are doing the best. Some of the countries that have the highest demand for oil: Canada, the United States, South Korea, Australia. And their air pollution mortality is some of the lowest in the world compared to other countries. Just a great chart. And I'm happy to make any of these available after this presentation and share them with the Alliance. But I want to talk kind of about our next war, that you will, war on oil and gas and war on clean, abundant American energy. And it's this environmental, social, and governance scoring that we keep hearing so much about. It's this ESG and like BlackRock, Larry Fink out of New York saying, we're going to divest companies of oil and gas. So they're going to force companies to divest of fossil fuels, of oil and gas, coal, nuclear, and it's basically virtue signaling to appease minority investors. This is unfortunate because it's really anti-Texas. It's anti-American, if you will, if you're going to force companies to divest of hydrocarbons, because you're just going to have more poverty around the world, and that's a bad thing. But you're seeing this pressure happening. It really started with the United Nations with this Principles for Responsible Investing decades ago, and getting companies to agree to these principles. And then they changed the principles to where they're anti-hydrocarbons. Companies like BlackRock, Larry Fink wants to get every single business that he invests in or his company invests in, they're the world's largest investor. They want them to divest of oil and gas. It's interestingly enough to note that they manage the state's 401k. So there are employees, the state of Texas, that are benefiting from the production of oil and gas to the tune of, I think, over $16.3 billion last year, nearly 1 million jobs. They're investing in companies, trying to invest in their 401k. Larry Fink at BlackRock is now taking those shares and investing in certain companies. And with those shares, he gets the voting rights of thousands of state employees, and then gets to direct those boards what to do, and threatens those boards, if they don't divest, they're going to replace the board. So it's just this credible attack on oil and gas that we are seeing, that we need to push back on. And we're going to at the Life Powered Project with some state policy ideas and some federal policy ideas. We've commented on Department of Labor's ruling that ERISA, the Employee Retirement Act, that they need to be investing in, worried about fiduciary responsibility, not environmental, social, and governance scores, that it needs to be fiduciary responsibility above all else. I want to talk a little bit about energy subsidies, because no one likes subsidies. They don't want to hear about subsidies. They think subsidies are bad, and they always think that oil and gas gets billions of dollars of subsidies. Oh, and they're awful, and tax breaks. So we actually did the most comprehensive research over the last 10 years that's been done on all energy subsidies. And what we found is when you break it down into an energy basis, look at how much subsidies they're getting on a per megawatt hour of electricity produced. And that's pretty eye-opening to me. So I think it's pretty safe to say, and some of the people that I've talked to in the oil and gas industry that would be fine with eliminating subsidies and tax breaks to level the playing field. Let's completely level the playing field. And you're going to see some of these particular industries possibly go away because they can't survive without getting $82 or almost $20 per megawatt hour of electricity produced. And then we'll talk about some of the density requirements. It's interesting in the Hill Country, in Hays County and Blanco County, two of the counties that I used to serve, there's the Permian highway pipeline that's been going through that's been somewhat controversial. Well, we did the math on this pipeline. It's 430 miles long. It's 50 feet wide. That's 2,606 acres. And if you wanted Texas to go 100% renewable, you would need 1.2 million acres for transmission. That's just transmission, an additional 5 million acres for generation of wind and solar. So that's for Texas to go the Green New Deal. You need 6.2 million acres total land, 1.2 million is for transmission lines. And by comparison, the Permian highway pipeline is 2,606 acres. But this is just a good visualization of energy density and how dense nuclear, coal, natural gas are compared to the unreliables that California has become so dependent on as of late, which has completely backfired. They've got a 33% mandate for renewable electricity. In August, they were getting less than 3% of their electricity from their renewable sources, and thus the reason why they had to have shutdowns and import over 30% of their demanded electricity from their surrounding states and Canada. What happens when we have really high regulations and high cost of oil, we tend to export jobs. And then by in turn, when we export jobs and we force manufacturing overseas because we're not producing goods with our energy, we export those jobs and then we in turn import the pollution. And in California, there's a 65% increase in ozone in Southern California that is attributed to Asian air pollution. Over 80% of the mercury deposited in the US is from natural sources and overseas emissions. Just mind-boggling that we would not want to manufacture goods here in the United States, that we would increase regulations, increase the cost of energy, ban some types of energy, ban some fracking, only to export jobs and then in turn import their pollution. You could essentially take off all the vehicles off the road in California, stop fossil fuels like they're trying to do, even though they don't have enough electricity. The governor came out last week and said, we're going to ban the sale of internal combustion engines. It must be 100% electric by 2035, even though they don't have enough electricity today. It's somewhat laughable, but you could take all the cars off the road in California and you're still not going to meet air quality standards because of Asian air pollution. That's another reason why we need to be calling on our trading partners to meet our standards. Talking about climate change, yes, the climate is changing. Yes, man has impact in it. Any foreseeable changes are going to be mild and manageable. There's a lot of talk about 2 degrees, and we've got to keep temperature rising below 2 degrees. Over the last 100 years, when we've seen an increase of temperature, about a Celsius, 1 degree, maybe a little bit more in warming, look what's happened. The climate-related deaths have gone down 98.9%. That's deaths from severe weather-related events. Since 2006, we've actually seen a decrease in the number and intensity of events. You won't read those headlines anywhere else. I'm getting fact-checked from The Guardian in the UK today. And it was laughable because we had a climate scientist write some information about hurricanes and their intensity and the number of them, and they didn't like our factual numbers. And so I really think the UK may be lost when it comes to energy, at least for 100 years or so. But these are the facts. This is the science. People are surviving. Humans are flourishing. All of this is happening while the population has increased 500%. Just amazing numbers that we've seen. I think your incredible social media team may have used similar images to this at the start of the pandemic. These are images just to let people know the products that we use in our daily lives and where they come from. And we felt like at the start of the pandemic, it was really a good time to highlight some of the personal protective equipment that we use and the products that they're made from that people completely take for granted. Michael Schellenberger's got a new book out now. It's called Apocalypse Never. And he talks about the difference in plant-based plastics and plastics from fossil fuels. And this is an environmental activist who you would never think would be writing this, even if they believed it. You wouldn't think they'd put it in writing, but he did. And he talks about plastics from hydrocarbons being better for the environment than plant-based plastics. They break down faster. They don't take as much land to produce. So it was just really interesting to read that. I recommend that book. I think I've got a slide with some recommended reading here towards the end. Oh, there it is. Good segue. Just some things that I recommend that you read. Apocalypse Never by Michael Schellenberger. Fueling Freedom by our very own Kathleen Hartnett-White, who is the former chairman of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. That's a great book. I recommend the Jackie Daly Show, and she's got a podcast if you missed her live show on the Blaze Network. Power Hour with Alex Epstein. And then we've got a weekly email that you can get on our website, lifepowered.org. Our email is called Facts Powered. I've got ADD and only can focus for so long. And it's a weekly email once a week, 2 topics that we cover in that are of interest with just some communication techniques on how to talk about the industry and the energy that we have and how blessed we are because we have access to it. I want to talk a little bit about our education curriculum. I've talked about Cy, but some of the success that we've had there. We actually have education curriculum that aligns with state standards, and it's implemented now in 6 school districts, which we grew from 1 last year to now 6 this year. But where it's Foundations of Energy, it's a high school CTE course. Again, meets the state standards, and we provide all the supplies to the schools. But I've seen some of the very biased energy information and education in our public schools that we have today, and we thought we needed to update that. So we've started on this effort. It is a years-long effort. This is kind of our shade tree that we're planting today to provide the shade and the fruit 10 and 20 years down the road. But it's unbiased information about all forms of energy produced here in the state of Texas. Great video series on our website, Raising America's Energy IQ. These are short videos, 40 seconds to 2 minutes, both in English and in Spanish. So I highly recommend you check out our Energy 101 series on our YouTube channel. And Jason, that's all I have from a presentation standpoint. Just want to share that information with you. And let me stop sharing my screen so we can go back to seeing our ugly mugs.
Perfect. And we'll start with our first poll question to our audience, which is, have you visited the Life Powered website and viewed some of their great material and fantastic content and videos? So hopefully we've got a good and informed group here that has checked out that website. It's really good stuff and also great videos. And Katie's done a phenomenal job on the facts and myths and the ability to immediately go to social media and say, these are the facts.
Yeah, and we're working on some updating our charts right now, and we're going to make those available on our website. You saw so many of the charts in the presentation, and I'm thinking, gosh, we just need to put that out there so people can use it, because we don't care if our name's on it. We just want to get the information out there and the facts and the science out there. So look for that update here in the next month or so with more charts and more data.
Okay, perfect. Well, so this first question is kind of top of mind this month, and the results just pop up. We've got 69% have been to the website, so we got to get those 31% to get over to the website after the program. But and thank you again for the great information. We have an incredibly consequential election this cycle. And on energy, the choice could not be more stark between energy independence and the Green New Deal. Can you elaborate on the choice before voters?
Yeah, absolutely. American energy dominance is at stake, and that's something that we've seen now for the first time, I think, in the last 70 years. We're actually a net exporter of energy. People are saving over $2,500 a year over the last few years because of the cost of energy has gone down. I know some on this call may love really high priced oil, the consumers, and there's got to be a balance in there. I think we're definitely short of the balance right now,
Right.
in the favor of consumers, and hopefully the price will go up. But it does benefit consumers. It does benefit Americans. And there's this effort to go net zero and this push. And I know one of the Vice President Biden said that he doesn't support the Green New Deal, but then he says it's I think the framework for the Biden-Harris or Harris-Biden energy plan, whatever it is. But it's interesting to note that I think he wants to go net zero by 2050. And we did the math on the Green New Deal, and I'll show a chart here. That's the cost. Let me show you what happens. Well, let me show you the cost. And this is to Texans of the Green New Deal. And I don't know if the text is right, but currently we're spending about $13 billion on electricity. You go Green New Deal, $120 billion a year. So that's the cost difference between what we have today, which may be, quite honestly, a little underfunded, because I just found out this morning that no one is investing in new natural gas-fired power plants in the state of Texas. And they're not doing it because, quite honestly, some of the subsidies that you see from wind and solar, why would you compete with somebody that could, is either giving away their product at some points in time, or they're paying their customers to take their product like we saw in 2017? You wouldn't. And so that's kind of threatening us. And we're going to work on some legislative efforts to really try to make sure that we have reliable electricity, that we're not like California next summer. But there's the cost of what the Green New Deal would mean to Texas, and some of the temperature results. We use the same model that the United Nations uses. They use this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. IPCC has a model that they use, and we can go in and look and say, okay, if we eliminate the carbon dioxide emissions in the city of San Antonio, what's going to happen? We can run the models. It takes us sometimes an hour or two to run the models, depending on the scenario. But when you look at the US, if we eliminate all the carbon dioxide emissions in the US by 2030, like it's called for in the Green New Deal, hold on, because there's the difference. Yeah, it really doesn't look like there's any difference on the thermometer, but it's 0.097 degrees by 2050. That's nothing. But your electricity cost is going to go from $1,000 a year to almost $4,000 a year. So there's the difference. It's, to go out, and when you go out to 2100, it's less than 0.2 of a degree difference using those UN models. And a lot of us have had the opportunity to see the effectiveness and how accurate those models are with the pandemic modeling. Right. Not incredibly accurate, but there's just some information there that we should know that, okay, here's the goal that the UN's trying to do, that if we go 100% carbon free, then it's only going to be less than 0.2 of a degree difference by 2100. That's nothing. That's completely mild and manageable.
Right. We had an audience question come in about kind of rollbacks that President Trump has led on. Certainly you remember we had an avalanche of regulation coming from the Obama administration right as he was coming out the door. And the question is President Trump's policies improving air quality or going the other way? Or are we seeing any difference really over these past 4 years?
Yeah, we've definitely seen difference. They've continued to trend in the direction towards reducing harmful pollution, which is great. I think that the policies the president has put in place in Congress and some of the rulemaking authority that you've seen come out of the EPA is really just reducing some redundancies. And it's putting power back into the states, which those of us that have served in the legislative body love, and a lot of Texans love our 10th Amendment. We love our states' rights, and we love the state being in charge of these things because it's closer to the people that they serve. And when you have all this duplicative regulatory issues from both the federal and the state government, it leads to higher cost. I don't like to attribute any of the clean air to government regulations because when you look back in the 60s, when our air quality was horrible, you saw improvements in air quality because of innovation. And it was the market that started demanding the invention and creation of the catalytic converter, where the scrubbers and bag houses that power plants started to put in place, not because there was any mandates whatsoever. So we started to trend in the direction of clean air before the government got involved. And yes, sometimes politicians like to pass things that are already happening so they can take credit for getting something done. Oh yeah, I was a champion for this when it was already happening. Been there, done that. But regardless, we're getting government out of the way. We're eliminating duplicative regulations, which do lead to higher costs, keep people out of jobs. And so I think we've seen some good moves over the last 3.5, 4 years on that front of economic prosperity and environmental leadership continuing to go hand in hand.
And what's your perspective on how do we get to this point? I mean, energy used to be a bipartisan issue that we needed more of it to thrive as a nation, but now we have one party saying the climate necessitates economic contraction while elevating foreign oil production and overseas manufacturing of wind, solar, and battery components. I mean, just you were saying, exporting jobs, importing pollution. It's so strange. How do we get here?
Yeah, and I tend to look back and try to accept responsibilities for the wrongs that are happening in my life, even if I can't really control them. But and then change what the behavior I was doing before. And I think that's what I'm trying to do now, is go out there and educate people about the benefits, kind of this facepalm moment, if you will, like, oh, I didn't know my cell phone was made out of plastics that came from hydrocarbons from oil and gas. I didn't realize my Lululemon yoga pants, I don't have yoga pants, but I do have Lululemon pants, are made with hydrocarbons from cracked, polypropylene. Really just trying to educate people about the benefits that we have. And I think that's kind of where the industry's fallen short over the last few years. I do think that there are some people that are capitulating because the message has gone so far left and so far anti-oil and gas that, oh, maybe we can give them some wins and prop up, this unreliable electricity and we'll feel good. Well, I was looking at some stuff by, Senator Collins today, Susan Collins, I think out of Maine, and she's getting attacked from the left. And I'm like, wow, she's usually been more on their issues than she's been on those, in energy producing states. And now she's getting attacked. Mm-hmm. And I hope she remembers that. I hope she's successful in her reelection, because hopefully I'll be in her office or visiting with her and her team a few days later and say, look where that got you. Quit capitulating. Let's be proud of American energy dominance, and let's see what we can do to promote it. Get our allies off of depending on foreign energy, foreign oil, foreign natural gas, and depend on American natural gas. I just saw, I think it was yesterday, Sergio Chapa reported record exports of natural gas into Mexico. Mm-hmm. That is awesome. We're helping out people in Mexico. And guess who's subsidizing our public education and our roads? That's awesome. I mean, if we can export more of our energy around the world, it's just going to be the benefit for America and for the global environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll remind our audience that if you'd like to ask a question, please utilize the chat feature. And you touched on this a little in your presentation, that foundations of energy, and this has been a passion for you since you were at the legislature. So catch our members up. Maybe they haven't heard the story of really how this became a passion for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was 7 years ago now. My son, who's now a senior in high school, was in 5th grade, and he comes home and we're actually in session. You're probably officing right down the hall from me. And I was looking through this test prep packet. He says, hey, Dad, help me. I've got my science star exam, and here's my prep packet. Will you go through these questions with me? And so it's one of those rare nights early in session when I'm at home and they're still awake, and I'm going through this packet, and I get to question 20 something, and it's, which of the following fossil fuels causes global warming? Oil, gas, coal, or D, all of the above? And I just went, I got so angry. And he's like, Dad, what's the next question? I'm flipping through this packet and I'm looking through, there's 100 questions. That's the only question on energy produced in the state of Texas. The only one. And I'm thinking, this better not. And I tell my son, I'm like, if you answer this question, if you see this on the test, I want you to answer D, all the above, but reread the question. Which of the following fossil fuels is lifting people out of poverty around the world? Which of the following fossil fuels is leading to clean air? And he's like, okay, Dad, I get it. Just ask me the questions. So I called TEA the next day. from my office. And I said, hey, I came across this question. I shared them a picture of the question. I said, is this on the test? Is this on the STAR test? And they confirmed that it was. And I politely said, it needs to come off. And let me know if I can help with your budget.
Mhm.
And fortunately, the next year it was gone from the test. And so I applaud TEA and the test writers for removing that incredibly biased question out of the test and putting energy produced in this state in a negative light. And that's really what began the movement, and working with some members in the legislature and people at the Railroad Commission. What can we do? Dr. Ken Morgan, who started the Energy Institute at TCU, what can we do? And we've had some success now. We're getting in more and more school districts, and still working with Wayne Christian on this particular issue. And I'm fortunate. My son now wants to go study energy
That's awesome.
in college. And it's great because there's not many people that are like that. And so why would you want to? With the negative light that it's put in, and we've got to change that, and we've got to put unbiased information for our kids out there.
That's right. That's right. Well, as part of that unbiased information, I'll throw up our next poll question. It was inspired by a recent Life Powered post on a number of good books addressing both energy and climate. So check all that you might have read or sitting on the shelf or nightstand. Lots of good books in there. So you touched on California. It's been in the news a lot lately, from companies moving out to devastating wildfires, ongoing blackouts. All three cases involve some bad energy policies that California politicians are implementing. Can you talk more about how state policy can go bad? And then we also got a question from the audience about big energy issues for the 87th legislative session, and some of your thoughts there.
Sure. Yeah. So first on California, it's just this virtue signaling investment in green bling, as I like to call it. And it's just to appease a few people on the radical left that dump millions and millions of dollars into campaigns, into efforts to keep it in the ground. And when someone tells me they want to keep it in the ground, I always come back and say, you first. I want to see you do it for 30 days. I'll come to your funeral in a couple of weeks, but I want to see you try it for 30 days. Give me your cell phone, give me your computer, give me most of your clothes that you use, the medicines, the refrigeration. I mean, the refrigeration alone has changed our lives significantly. Being able to refrigerate food and being able to refrigerate medicine has led to an incredible health impact on Americans' life. So it's just these crazy policies, a 33% requirement, and they're going to go to 60% requirement for renewable electricity, which quite honestly, it benefits Texas, because we've got this McComas landfill in the Dallas area that produces renewable natural gas, which many people on this call know that you can get an MMBTU of natural gas produced for between $2 and $3. I haven't checked my gas prices today, but I think that's probably about accurate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, out of the McComas landfill, California is going to pay about $12 an MMBTU for it, because it's renewable natural gas. And that's not the market at work right there. And that's just unbelievable, and it's unreal, but that's what they're doing. And that's why their electric rates are 6 times higher than anywhere else in the United States, on average 6 times higher. And it's the highest electricity cost in the US. It's no wonder people are fleeing California, and I like to say, welcome to Texas, vote accordingly. And please repeat that.
Right.
That's a big issue that we're seeing, is people are, well, I can't afford to live there. I'm going to go to Texas, and I'm going to just put the same policies and same people in place that I've always voted for. And then they're surprised when we get the same policies and the same people here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening in Austin. And that's going to be one of the big fights that we deal with next legislative session. Is no, it's not building the wall all around the entire state, but that might not be a bad idea either. But it's these policies that are happening as Austin's proposing, that's banning natural gas in the city of Austin. This started in Berkeley, California. And I know you remember House Bill 40, Jason, a lot from the 2015 legislative session. And that's the framework that we need to take to stop municipalities from banning the use of natural gas in their city limits. So Austin wants to ban natural gas. So if you're building a new building, sorry, you can't have natural gas to heat the building. If you're building a new house or you're remodeling a home, no natural gas. Yes, remodeling, you're going to have to rip out your natural gas appliances. I don't know what Austin's going to do, because just last year they got a grant, or maybe it's 2 years ago, a grant from the Texas Emission Reduction Program from the TCQ to build a new natural gas fueling station. So they
Right.
get the grant to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now they're just going to rip it out. Well, they're going to return that money to the taxpayers. I think they should. And ironically, it's where I fuel my truck, at, the natural gas fueling station that the city of Austin owns. So I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest legislative battles, because the city of Dallas is proposing something similar. And it is purely about control. These policies have the biggest impact on the least among us more than anyone else. Expensive energy hurts the poor. When you look at families in San Antonio, we did the research on San Antonio. There's, and I can't remember the exact population, but I remember it's 170,000 families spend over 30% of their income on their home energy bills. Any effort to increase those costs are unacceptable, and they do nothing to improve the environment. What you're going to have is, if you drive up the cost of natural gas, people are going to go back to cooking and heating their homes with wood, and that's going to have indoor air quality issues. People are going to have lung illnesses. It's just poor, and it's dumb policy that we've got to put a stop to. So I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest legislative battles that we see next legislative session, is stopping these natural gas ban.
Good.
I hope we see an effort on the front with ESG. I don't think companies like BlackRock that are anti-Texas should have any business with the state of Texas. I think we need to take this. In 2017, there was the anti-BDS bill regarding Israel, that if you want to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel, you shouldn't be doing business with the state of Texas. That passed, was signed into law. I think we need to take the same framework of bill to the legislature that says, if you're going to boycott, divest, or sanction oil and gas that's produced here in Texas, then you shouldn't be doing business with the state of Texas. And we should go after companies like BlackRock that are managing our 401k, that have funds that employees can invest in. Shouldn't be the case. We should not be able to invest any of our funds into companies like BlackRock that are really anti-Texas.
Right. I'll put up our third poll question and then go back to an audience question. We'd like to hear your biggest concerns going into the November election. So lots of choices there that we've heard from some of the presidential candidates. And on that last one, the moral case for fossil fuels, Alex Epstein was the big winner. Lots of people have read that book, and it's a phenomenal book. So Judy Stark with PPROA asked, how can associations do a better job of partnering with Life Powered to get your information out and kind of make it known to folks we're visiting with, and also our members?
That's great. Yeah. And we're happy to provide presentations. We help a lot of executives within the industry. We help members of Congress. We advise the White House on communication and research and policy recommendations. So you're welcome to take anything on our website and use that, our presentations, our videos. It's interesting. I go to some association websites and look at their websites and their videos, and they're, 8 out of 9 of the videos are Life Powered videos, which is great. We want that information that's just getting out there. And so if I can ever speak to any members or people, just let me know. I'm available and happy to do that, to help, again, raise America's energy IQ and get people proud of the industry that your members are working in every single day, because they're producing the energy that's going to end poverty around the world. And that should be kind of goal number one, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, the prospect, and you see here, the number one concern is implementation of the Green New Deal, which just calls for the domestic oil and gas industry going away.
And does nothing to improve the environment, which is, I was joking about that this morning with a congressional candidate talking about the Green New Deal. And we've read the resolution several times. It calls for the elimination of greenhouse gases. Not the elimination of greenhouse gas emissions, just the elimination of greenhouse gases. The largest one in the atmosphere that causes the most warming is water vapor, something that we kind of need to have life on Earth. So really, and it's just mind-boggling that people signed on to support this resolution that calls for the end of all life on Earth. And that's what happens if you eliminate water from the atmosphere. You end all life on Earth. And that's what the resolution calls out for. Just laughable, but
Right. And you touched on LNG and just what are some of the global trends in energy policy? Certainly we've had China and India and parts of Africa as their middle class are coming up and starting to get cleaner burning stoves, vehicles. We've seen some energy policies change around the world. Can you touch on that and then possibly how it's benefited our environment?
Yeah, and it has. Everywhere that it's been implemented, the use of natural gas improves the environment because it typically is displacing either a dirtier method or a dirtier product. Wood, it could be biomass. It's typically replacing something that's not as clean and as efficient as natural gas. And so that's good for the local environment, the air quality. It's good for water, but you need a lot of energy to clean water. We're number one in the world when it comes to access to clean and safe drinking water. People don't understand that. Not many people know that, especially with the apocalyptic messages that we hear on the media every day. It's interesting to note, in 1970, less than 40% of our municipal water systems met the lowest standards for water in the U.S. Today, over 90% meet the highest standards. Yes, there are still issues. We're dealing with some water systems here in Texas and in Flint, Michigan that certainly don't fall in that 90%, but 90% is pretty good. And again, we're number one. And so if we can export our energy and help these countries develop, help them get wealthy, it will lift them out of poverty. And I've been to some of these third world countries. It was heartbreaking to travel to Tunisia and Egypt right after the start of the Arab Spring in 2012. And you see piles of trash just building up on the corners of the streets. And I'm like, where are the trash cans? I literally chewed gum one day in Tunisia and could not find a trash can to put it in. So I wind up folding it up in a napkin and putting it in my pocket all day. I'm like, where are the trash cans? And that's what happens when the economy collapses. The people could care less about the trash. Get to Cairo and you see the huge piles of trash along the canals that feed into the Nile River. And then I'm like, why do they put them there? Are the trucks going to come by and pick them up and dispose of this? What are they going to do? Nope. 3 days later, I see men with boards and cardboard pushing that trash into the canals that feed into the Nile. And it's just heartbreaking to see that. And if we can help countries improve their economies, and energy is the number one key to doing that. And so I see so many opportunities to export our Texas natural gas around the world. And we're doing that. We're doing it to India, Poland, and Mexico are probably the three biggest talked about places where we're doing it. And it's just awesome because especially when you see what they're providing for here in the United States and in Texas, it's jobs, it's funding for our public education, it's funding for our roads. So it's just incredible win-win-win.
I was blown away from my time with Chairman Craddock at the Railroad Commission, but also to South Korea. And so thinking about places where Russia has been selling gas and now we're competing with them. But then we've got some of our friends like Germany and some other European countries look to rely more on Russian gas as opposed to American and Texas natural gas. It's disappointing to see Europe go one way, but then other parts of the globe really bright spots right now.
Yeah, well, Germany's questioning finishing that pipeline where they're going to get natural gas from Russia. I think because of an assassination or attempted assassination recently, they're revisiting that idea. And I'm like, that's great. You can get it from the United States because you'll look at the environmental record and the way that because of our American innovation and our American dominance, the way we produce things, we produce them cleaner than anywhere else in the world. And so we could produce and export American natural gas to Europe, and the emissions reduction is 40% lower than getting that same natural gas from Russia. And that to me is just mind-boggling. We're transporting it and we're producing it. We're putting a pipeline, we're liquefying it, transporting it via vessel, and the emissions are 40% reduced than that of getting the same natural gas from Russia. And I think it's 49% fewer emissions than Russian gas to China compared to American natural gas to China. That's awesome. And it's American leadership. So we've got some real good opportunities for business and to improve the environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you for your time today and your insight and sharing with us Life Powered. It's a phenomenal website, and really encouraged for those. I think we had 30% that have not been to the website yet. Please go and check it out. It's a number of great resources. Do you have any closing thoughts for our members and our guests today?
No, it's 28 days from the election. I think polls close in about 28 days and 4 hours and 5 minutes. Not that anyone's counting. I am, but no, we've got to get out and we've got to get people to vote. And, I just closing thoughts be go to our website, find an op-ed that you like, an article that you like, a video that you like, and share it with somebody. Follow us on social media, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and share our materials, because that's the growth that we kind of need for people that work in the industry, that support the industry, for their followers to see this information out there.
That's great advice. Jason, thank you so much. Again, Jason can be found on the web at lifepowered.org. He's on social media as well, so please connect with him. Jason, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it very much. Great to see you.
Have a good one. If you're interested in sponsoring future events, we want to hear from you. We've got a very exciting webinar upcoming. The Spotlight on the Issues webinar series will be back next week, actually, with Congressman Dan Crenshaw on Thursday, October 15th at 11 a.m. Thank you for joining us. Please be sure to fill out the exit survey so we can make these events even better. Hope y'all have a great day. Thank you so much.